So recently there's been a lot of talk about tariffs in the news, and specifically about this equation to calculate tariffs published by the Trump administration and showcased in this nifty little chart. So to alleviate potential confusion about what's going on, I've made this video to explain how tariffs work, why countries decide to use them, and why Trump's tariff equation is a bit, how do I put this lightly, completely wrong. So to start, how do tariffs work? This is country A. They have a ton of sheep, and so they make the world's finest balls of yarn. And this is country B. Because they're an island nation, they catch the juiciest, floppity fresh fish. And so these two countries decide to trade. Yarn for fish for yarn, everyone's happy. But one day, the fishers in country A aren't so happy. Because country B is an island nation, they can produce a ton of fish and send them over to country A for really cheap. But this means that these fishers in country A can't compete. So country A imposes a tariff, which is a tax on imported fish coming from country B. One tuna, that'll be 5 shiny coins. This makes country B's fish more expensive in country A. Now, local fish in country A are more competitive. The fishers rejoice, but regular cats have to pay more for fish or settle for less. And country B isn't thrilled either. They're selling less fish now. So tariffs can help protect local industries, but they can also mean higher prices and unhappy trading partners. So even in the feline world, economics is a delicate balance of clause and consequences. This is why we have people who study economics. It's important to be very delicate and use a lot of good, well-founded math to be careful when applying tariffs and other things, because you need to balance protecting domestic industries with not making other countries mad and making prices go up. I mean, can you imagine if instead of doing this, we used a formula that was more arbitrary and had nothing to do with tariffs? So, as it turns out, the Trump administration used a formula that was more arbitrary and had nothing to do with tariffs. So on the left, we have the change in reciprocal tariffs, where I refers to a specific country. XI is the total exports coming from the US to this country, so in essence, all of the stuff the US is selling. MI refers to the total imports coming from the country to the US, so in essence, all of the stuff the US is buying. I'll note really quickly that these terms should be reversed, because otherwise you're going to get a sign difference, but that'll come later. Then you divide this difference, called the trade deficit, by the total imports from that country, again all of the stuff we're buying from them. You also have this epsilon value, which is the elasticity of imports, which they state is less than 0, which in math is a bit cursed. You also have phi, which is the pass-through from tariffs to import prices. But note that these are essentially constants, which showcase how responsive people are to these tariffs and how much the price actually changes. Directly from the US government website, they set epsilon equal to 4, which funnily enough contradicts the statement earlier about epsilon being negative, and they set phi equal to 1/4. So in this equation they cancel out, leaving just the trade deficit divided by the imports for a specific country. So what does this equation mean? Let's go with an example. Going on to the US government's website again, we see that we sold China $143.5 billion worth of stuff, and we bought $438.9 billion worth of stuff from them. So in essence, you have a trade deficit of negative $295.4 billion, or with Trump's equation, $295.4 billion because of the sign error mentioned earlier. Then we divide this by the total imports from China, again $438.9 billion. Then we get a tariff rate of $295.4 billion divided by $438.9 billion, which is around 67%, which is what is shown on Trump's list of tariffs. And real quick, I'd like to mention that trade deficits are not necessarily bad. For example, I'm sure that when all of you go to the grocery store, you buy a lot more from them than they buy from you, but that doesn't mean they're ripping you off or having a 67% tariff rate on you. But according to this administration, this is what is happening. Because we buy more from China than they buy from us, it means they deserve to have a 67% tax on all of the goods we buy from them. And it gets even crazier. You may notice that there is a suspiciously large number of countries that have 10% applied to them. As it turns out, we actually have a surplus with these countries, but we're just applying a flat 10% anyway. For example, let's consider the United Kingdom. We sold the UK $79.9 billion worth of goods, and they sold $68.1 billion to us, again coming directly from the official government website. This gets us a trade surplus of $11.8 billion, which again, because of the sign error in Trump's formula, is negative $11.8 billion. If we divide this by the imports of this country, it's negative $11.8 billion divided by $68.1 billion, which gets us negative 17%. So if we were to follow Trump's logic, it appears that we're actually ripping off the UK. We're selling more stuff to them than they are selling to us, and thus we should actually have a negative tariff to apply to the goods. But instead, what happens is that we have a minimum tariff of 10%, regardless of if we have a trade surplus or not. One last thing I want to mention is that this second column is what Trump is making the reciprocal tariffs. In essence, because he is so generous, he is only charging half of what other countries are supposedly charging to us. So China, for example, supposedly has 67% tariffs on all of our stuff. Then Trump takes that number and divides it by 2 to get what we are charging to them. I do want to note that for the countries that we have a trade surplus with, we are charging the same reciprocal tariff of 10%, but for any country we have a trade deficit with, we apply the 1/2 pretty uniformly. So I feel it goes without saying that this isn't really the best way to calculate tariffs. Economics, especially international trade, is way more complicated than this, like entire textbooks complicated. You've got supply chains, market responses, country-specific agreements, World Trade Organization rules. Trust me, it gets messy. A single equation just doesn't cut it. But yeah, that's the video. Hope you enjoyed.